So then he concludes the chapter like he does most chapters with kind of a summary of this, and I think this is really good to go through because this is the summation of kind of the Columbo tactic. So in this chapter, we learned how to defend against the Columbo tactic when it's used against us. And again, it's not always bad to have the first two done, and in fact, even leading questions could be fine if it's moving the conversation forward in a legitimate manner that is to provide clarification to the point that they want you to get to. But it's different to have a kind of an accusatory language. And then second is to remind yourself that you are in control of your side of the conversation, as with all time. So you're responsible for what you say. So make sure what you're saying is what you want to say.
Yeah.
And then if someone's asking you these leading questions, like a street epistemologist, and again, I would suggest going on to YouTube because there's a bunch of trainings out there on how to do it and how to defeat it and everything like that. But just politely refuse to answer the person's leading question and turn it on them. What are you getting by this? I see you're trying to make a point within that question. Can you let me know where you're going with it so I can better respond to it? Right. Ask them to simply state his point and the reasons for it so you can give the issues some thought. And it might, be something that you've never really thought about, or they're, if they're trying to get you to move from point A, B, C, D to get to Z, ask them Z. Yeah. And then, figure out.
Yeah, tell me what your Z here is.
Yeah.
He says also that we've learned to be alert for questions that are not really questions at all, right? But assertions in disguise, right? Who are you to say, right, is an assertion. It's not really a question. He says when we encounter these situations, we point out the question is confusing, right? Who am I to say? Well, my name is Tony. Are you asking who? What are you saying? Right?
Yeah, professor,
right.
nonetheless. So.
Then ask the person to rephrase it in the form of a statement, right? Or, simply ask your first Columbo question. What do you mean by that? Who am I to say? What do you mean?
Right. Yeah. Are you asking, like, how do I know so much?
Yeah.
I have book suggestions. You want to talk about books? I'll talk about books. Clearly what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, the Columbo tactic is this kind of overarching kind of mother of all tactics because it provides so much calmness. It provides direction. It kind of allows you to be on the same footing as that other person. Again, realizing that there is no neutral ground, but at the same time, you can at least progress forward in responding to anything that might come up. And these kind of three areas, questions, help drive that conversation forward of where you want to go. Mm-hmm. So the Columbo tactic is a disarming way to go on the offensive with carefully selected questions that productively advance the conversation, right? There's a specific person for the questions we ask. It's first to gain information. What do we mean by that? Second, to reverse the burden of proof. How did you come to that conclusion? And the third is to make points, ask leading questions that aren't accusatory or that are in a way to kind of have an ulterior motive. So have you ever considered that? Or can you clear this up for me? And then ask a question. And again, it's responding to people. But if they're wanting to ask you, well, what do you mean by that? And how did you come to that conclusion? Great. Perfect.
Yeah, you can go for it.
Let's talk about it. Yeah. That's exactly what we want to do. Yeah. And so hopefully this book is really helpful in kind of getting you out there and kind of talking to other people about your faith and not being too worried about, what if they talk about the Council of Chalcedon and, in some time period. Well, hey, we learned about that. If someone knows more than you, go back to the first two.
That's right.
What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? Yeah. Let me take a moment here and pause and figure this out. I'll go research it and come back.
I'm sure you can research it for me. Yeah. What are you saying here, right? And let them educate you. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, talk about all that. Yeah. It's when people say, the original Greek meant this, and like, whoa, I don't know Greek, but I know a few people who do, and you look it up and they go, that's not what the Greek says at all. Weird. So it could be, they learned it from somebody else, because that's sometimes what we do. We go to secondary sources rather than primary sources, or there's a whole slew of responses here, and it doesn't have to be confrontational, but you want to have a conversation, and so that's the point here.